Hi, I'm Pat Kelly from the Ventura County Fire Department, and I'm coming to you with another segment on personal preparedness for Leisure Village TV. As we know, our primary risk in the county, and in Leisure Village especially, is going to be damage from an earthquake. And there's a number of steps that you can take to make sure that you can minimize the potential damage and prepare yourself for this eventuality. Step one is to secure your space. Look at your water heater, heavy furniture and other items, and secure those items to wall studs with metal fasteners. Avoid heavy hanging containers for soil-rooted plants. If you have items that are heavy or breakable up on high shelves, consider fastening those or moving them down to a lower shelf. Move furniture that may be heavy away from beds, sofas, places where people sit, sleep, or spend a lot of time. Eliminate or minimize the storage of combustible liquids in your house. Identify an interior safe space like a corner or under a heavy piece of furniture that you might go and find shelter until the earthquake stops. Step two is to prepare your home. Know the location of your utility shutoff, your water, your electricity, and gas. And know how to use those things and shut them off appropriately if directed to following a disaster. Importantly, you need to install a fire extinguisher in your house. Make sure it's kept maintained, and make sure that you know how to use it in the event of emergency. Make sure that your smoke alarms and your carbon monoxide detectors always have fresh batteries, that they get changed or replaced either yearly or as directed by the manufacturer. Consult with your homeowner's insurance agents. Make sure that you have enough coverage to protect yourself following a disaster. And also, if you haven't inquired whether you need flood insurance or not, maybe that's something you want to talk to them about as well. As I mentioned in the previous segment, much of Leisure Village is in what FEMA deems to be a FEMA floodplain. Hi, I'm Pat Kelly from the Ventura County Fire Department, bringing you another segment in our series on personal preparedness. What I wanted to talk about today, as we've talked about in the past, is disaster planning. As we know, and I've mentioned previously, one of the biggest hazards that we face as Ventura County residents, but also as Leisure Village residents, is the risk of earthquake. To minimize that risk and to minimize some of the damage that might be incurred after an earthquake, we need to plan ahead. We need to make a kit, we need to have a plan, and we need to be prepared. In the event of a large emergency or a disaster, truth is that we could find ourselves without any assistance by local county services such as the police, fire department, emergency medical services, for a period of up to 72 hours. Depending on your personal situation and the resulting damage from an earthquake or other emergency, probably the first critical decision that you're going to have to make is whether to stay or evacuate your home. In the event you do make the decision to evacuate your home, you need to make sure that you have a kit standing by, ready to go with you. You also must make sure that you have a plan. You have a plan prior to the emergency, where you're going to go, where you're going to take shelter. And third, you're going to need to be informed. You need to stay current on what's going on with the disaster, what the severity is, and any kind of updated information that might come out resulting from the disaster. Preparing a kit consists of 7 vital steps that everyone should take to make sure they're ready to go following a disaster. When you're putting together a kit for your 72-hour period, you need to consider those things such as food, water, medicines, perhaps an extra set of eyeglasses or other things that are specific to your case. But you also need to put them in a place that's accessible, easy to get to after a disaster, and make sure that you take your own abilities and limitations into consideration when planning these things. Perhaps you need to break down your emergency kit into a wheeled trash can or something like that, or even break your kit down into several different bags depending on your physical limitations or your abilities. You also need to make sure that your identification is clearly visible on your emergency kit. If you're thinking about post-disaster, and perhaps having to evacuate, there's a high probability that there's going to be a lot of people's kits in the same place as yours. You want to make sure that yours is easily identifiable and easy to find. Make sure that when you build your kit, that you also consider maintenance of your kit. Change out those items that might be perishable, such as food, water. Your medication might have expiration dates. Replace the batteries in any kind of small electronics like a radio, a flashlight, or things of that nature. So it's not only good to have a kit, but that's just half the battle. You also have to maintain that kit and give attention to that kit on a regular basis. You want to make sure that everything in that kit is always ready to go. Make sure you communicate your plan and go over your preparedness steps with your village coordinator. That person's a vital resource and can provide you many insights into getting prepared and what to do following a disaster. Due to the fact that many of the Leisure Village residents may have different levels of ability or disability, make sure that those things that you need to get around on a day-to-day basis are labeled and easily identifiable. We want to make sure following a disaster that you have those things that make you as comfortable and as mobile as possible, and we can provide those things and help you reunite with those things if they become separated from you. When a disaster occurs, one of the biggest things that we can do to make sure that things go smoothly is to have a plan of action. Don't wait until that disaster strikes to figure out what you're going to do next. Have that plan, communicate that plan with your relatives as well as your neighbors. Having a plan is going to reduce panic following a disaster. When we're putting together our plan, some of the things that we should consider is, who are we going to call after a disaster? Or who's going to call us? Do we have somebody scheduled to come and check on us? Have we communicated our plan? Some of you might not have your own transportation. Don't wait until after a disaster to figure out how you're going to get from point A to point B. Have those transportation items taken care of prior to a disaster. Having a plan is just one of the key components, but you also need to communicate that plan. People need to know what you're going to do following a disaster. They need to know where you're going to evacuate to. So make sure that you communicate that plan so those that love you can come and reunite with you at that place that you're going to evacuate to. And consider having an alternate evacuation location. If there is a big disaster, your primary evacuation location might not be good enough anymore. So you might have to have maybe a secondary or even a third location identified and communicated that you could evacuate to following a disaster. Post those emergency numbers of your family, your loved ones, the people that check on you, near all the phones in your house. Make sure if you do have a cell phone or some kind of mobile phone that you have those programmed into your phone. For those of you that do use cell phones, you should also program the in case of emergency feature on the home screen of your phone. I think that would be another thing that you could consult with the village coordinator with for any assistance. Make sure that any of the documents that can't be replaced are either made copies of or stored somewhere in another location so you always know they'll be there. Examples of these kind of documents would be insurance papers, wills, marriage certificates, death certificates, birth certificates, any kind of thing that's going to need to be recreated following a disaster, or any kind of thing that might help you identify yourself, such as a driver's license, a passport, things like that. Make sure that you have copies of those things and you know where they're always kept.